Welcome to My Life, Chassidus Applied, episode 319. I'd like to begin with a special announcement. In the last 5 months, since the pandemic broke out, I'm sure you're aware that we have intensified and heightened, putting it mildly, our output. It was very clear, literally, from day one, that this is a unique and unprecedented time, and frankly, a wake-up call, a historic wake-up call, that in our lifetimes will be probably the most defining event. And the necessity to rise to the occasion, and in face of all the unknown, the uncertainties, the disruptions, the upheavals, including the disorientation, we need to dig deeper and find deeper resources within our souls. The courage, the resilience, the strength, the hope, and recognize that not only can we deal with the challenges, but we can come out stronger than ever. So I am honored and humbled to have been part of this with a wonderful team. Including this My Life program, we focused on themes and ideas that are relevant to each one of us in these unique times. And where more do you see Chassidus' power, the power of Torah, when in times of crisis or in times of challenge? That's when you recognize, that's when you can see. When things are going well, you can get away with a certain taking for granted on a surface level. There's a pattern, there's routines, we rely on our crutches, on our comfort zones, on our security blankets. But in a time when there is a setback and when things are not going as planned, that's when you really see the power of Torah, of Yiddishkeit, of faith, of bitachon, trust, the need to recognize that God is in control, and that when you recognize that, you come to a certain inner peace. So I'm proud to say that though no one wanted this, no one asked for this, and it's caused plenty of pain and loss and tragedy, but it also demonstrated the power of the human spirit, of the neshama, in ways that you often don't see. The response I've received from people, all walks of life, has been also really heartwarming, encouraging, actually transformative, I would even say. Many people refer to our programs as you're a lifeline to us. You're a lifeline. So in thinking about it and in responding to many people's feedback and the back and forth, especially in these times where we in a way are connected more than ever, even when there are the social distancing challenges, so we decided to launch a meaningful Lifeline campaign, a fundraising campaign, where we ask you to partner with us in all these activities. We've reached hundreds of thousands of people. We cannot stop. Not only that, we need to increase and expand. So please partner with us. We're literally launching it today on the 5th of Av, the yahrzeit of the Arizal, right a few days before Tisha B'Av, which we'll speak about. Go to meaningfullife.com/lifeline and participate in any level you wish. Please be generous. This is an opportunity where there is literally a partnership, and I see it as a gift, and this is not an obligation on your part. See it as an opportunity, as a blessing, and hopefully our union, our partnership on all levels, spiritual levels, psychological, emotionally stronger as we stand together, and also financially, will help finally tip the scales, and we truly take advantage of this global wake-up call and really bring the most important resources ever. And these are not material resources. Just as the body needs health, needs exercise, needs vitamins, so does the soul. And I like to believe that we, including myself, my team at the Meaningful Life Center, are part of the solution, and we hope you join us in turning this wake-up call into a true personal and global redemption. As the Rambam says, one act, one thought, one word can tip the scales and bring personal and global geula, tshuva, v'hatzola, loy u'lekola elam kulei, to the person and to the entire world. So again, meaningfullife.com/lifeline. And thank you in advance for all your help and support. Please share this with others. We have a beautiful 30-second video there. You can see a summation of all the work we've done. But above all, take advantage of it. There's tremendous materials there. Short videos like the spiritual antidotes. There's the longer videos with programs like My Life, as well as the weekly class I give, the master class, different podcasts, articles, you name it, for men, women, and children of all walks of life. And we ask you to partner with us in this. Thank you very much. That's my opening announcement. I mentioned that we are now in the beginning of, it's the week of Tisha B'Av. This is the saddest week in the Jewish calendar, leading to Thursday, which will be Tisha B'Av. We all hope that before Thursday comes, we'll already have the Geula and Moshiach, and as the Medrash says, Tisha B'Av will be then the greatest holiday. And as I've discussed last week and all the time, this is a central theme in Judaism in general, in Torah, and specifically in Chassidus, that what you see is not what you get. On the surface level, yes, the destruction of the first temple and the second temple occurred on the 9th of Av. But as the Arizal says, whose yahrzeit is today, Hey Av, as the Arizal says, why do we say Nachem in the afternoon, Tisha B'Av? By Mincha, Nachem is a comforting, a consolation, is because the moment of when the flames were at their highest in destroying the Beis HaMikdash was the birth of Moshiach. As the Medrash tells us, which seems odd, in the darkest moment is the birth of the greatest moment. That only tells you that there's no such thing as a negative as an end in itself. Yes, the greatest powers are born in the darkest moments. While it's burning and while it's negative and while we are in Golus and exile, we don't see it. But we believe it and we completely trust that the process will come to a conclusion, and then we will recognize that the deepest salvation, the deepest redemption was born in Tisha B'Av. Mashiach's birth day is on Tisha B'Av, and Tisha B'Av in the afternoon, which is why a few days later we celebrate Tu B'Av. The 15th of Av is one of the greatest holidays. It's equated with Yom Kippur because it's direct proportion to the darkness comes the great light. Now, you can ask the question, why is that the case? Why is that the case? Why can't Mashiach's birthday be on Pesach, on Shavuos, on Yom Tov, and other special days? So this goes deeper, especially as Chassidus explains it. Why is there darkness in the first place? How could there be a world that a Roman Empire, and before that a Babylonian Empire, can even come and touch the Holy of Holies, the holiest place on earth, God's Holy of Holies? Where do they have that power? How could we live in a world where that's possible? So that takes us back to the purpose of existence. God created a world that has independent consciousness. In the famous words, cited from the Medrash Tanchuma in different places, the Alter Rebbe, chapter 36 in Tanya, the purpose, Tachlis Brias Ha'elamus, what is the purpose of creation? Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu, God desired, Lias Le Yizbarach Dira B'Tachtenim, as the Rebbe Rashab would add the word Yizbarach, Lias Le Dira B'Tachtenim, a home, a dwelling place. In Tachtenim, Alter Rebbe continues, what is Tachtenim? Tachtenim means the lowest. So he says not lowest in space, lowest in revelation. That in the whole Seder Shtalshlus, which is the cosmic order, there are different levels of divine revelation. Atzilus, of course, is a world of godliness. Bria is more concealed. Tachtenim is the lowest place where the darkness, where the concealment is so intense that you can't recognize the divine within existence. And in that itself, to the point of cheshach kofla mechupla, darkness that's so dark that it conceals that it's dark, it's filled with all types of negative forces, to the point that they say, Aniva afsied, I and nothing else. They deny God altogether. Eined mulvade is the reality, that there's nothing but God. And they say, Aniva afsied, oid, nothing but me. The antithesis in every possible way to the truth of existence, that God is the only reality. So in this space, which according to how the Arizal explains it, the Tzimtzum Arishon, this space, conceptual space, that allows for another consciousness to emerge beyond the divine consciousness, with the purpose of creating a dira b'tachtenim, that leaves room, and that leaves an afsharius, a possibility that in that space will be misunderstood, because the concealment which allows for us to be tachtenim, in order for us to connect to the divine, also allows for the possibility that we choose to say, you know what? This is our natural reality, this concealment. Who says we have to change anything? We're deceived by the concealment to think it's an end in itself. The famous example brought in so many places. In Chassidus, the Rebbe cites it often. That what? That the concealment is such, like a parent, a father hiding from his child, in order to elicit the ingenuity of the child to find the father, the parent. The father concealed himself so well that the child at some point stops looking, gives up, to the point he says maybe he's not there. And he forgets. He forgets that the whole point was for him to find his father, and he goes off on his own agenda. That's, of course, when it turns south, it turns negative. Never forget the words the Rebbe uttered, Tu B'Shvat, Tavshin Lamed Tes. The year was 1979. The Rebbe speaking, he brought this example. And the tears, and it was just, what can I say? It was so heart-shattering, describing this example. Though the father hides, the son looks. The Rebbe said, Sonntag gesucht. Sunday he's looking for his father. Montag gesucht. Dienstag gesucht. Monday he's seeking. Tuesday he's looking. And at some point he gives up. Was is schuldig, says that. Why is he responsible, the child? The father hid himself so well. And when do we see that most? Of course, in this week of Tisha B'Av. The concealment of all days of the year, the deepest concealment is when? In the 3 weeks in general, in the 9 days more specifically, and the 9 days itself, on Tisha B'Av. The deepest concealment. But within the concealment lies the whole purpose. Why was there a concealment in the first place? Because that's Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu Atzmus. The essence of the divine wants Tachteim. No, he doesn't want the concealment as an end in itself. Chassidus says that Tzimtzum is Hepach HaRotzen. It's not what he wants. It's a means to an end. He wants the dira b'tachtenim. But there can only be a dira b'tachtenim if there's room for an independent entity to be a tachten. A tachten, in other words, there's no revelation. And yet, it's not airtight. That tachten, that the lowest of existence, lowest levels of existence should seek out the Father. But after years, sometimes we give up. So therein lies, in the darkest moment, when the temple is being burned by the worst enemies possible, as the fire is at its highest, is the birth of Moshiach, because that's the whole purpose of why the concealment happened in the first place. So it's not the Romans or the Babylonians or anyone has power. It's God created a concealment. And part of the reality is that the concealment allows for negative forces to dominate. Yes, it's tragic, it's very sad. But the story is not over. Because within it all lies embedded, whether we see it or not, the purpose of it all, the birth and the coming of Moshiach and the Geula. So Tisha B'Av is a paradoxical day. On one hand, yes, it's the epitome. It personifies the ultimate concealment. And yet the whole concealment personifies in the essence of the divine to create a reality where the divine can be concealed. Think of that. The divine, which is absolute reality, is allowing for another entity to emerge, which is our consciousness. And Arizal, those that want to make the mistake, make the mistake. As God told Moshe Rabbeinu when he saw the words, Nasa Adam, we shall create man in the divine image. What kind of we? It suggests a duality. People will make a mistake. So the God says, if you want to make a mistake, those that want to make a mistake will make a mistake. What does that mean? Because all of existence, God created an agnostic universe. He leaves room for us to either seek or not seek. So we need to be wise and see through the curtain, see through the smoke screens, see through the concealment, that it's only meant to bring out the best in us. And no matter what happens, and no matter what has happened in history, and much has happened, many dark moments, we did not give up. And we're here. And we're standing. And we're not living in Nazi Europe. And we're not living in the communist, the former Soviet Union, and under pogroms, and crusades, and inquisitions, whatever order, and the massacres, and the persecutions, and the expulsions, and so on. We're here, and we're talking about it. And we're told by the Rebbe, and by all the Simonim in the Gemara, and throughout all the Sifrei Kei, the holy books, that we're at the threshold of it finally erupting. What erupting? All the good that was done, and piercing the darkness and bringing the Gula. This is how the Torah Chassidus looks at a week like this. And the lessons are astounding, because they teach us there's no such thing as being destroyed. Nothing can kill us. There's always going to be the ember. There's always going to be the spark somewhere deep inside. Yes, there'll be difficult moments, and there have been difficult moments. And now we're going through our own challenges. I can't compare it to the past, to the history of our parents and grandparents. But whatever the challenge may be, the story is not over until the revelation returns. And now it's up to us to not allow setbacks, not allow concealments, not allow all the different challenges we face to impede our way, or in any way obfuscate that march forward, the march forward toward progress, toward, a generation and a time where we will celebrate Gula Amitis Vashlema. Yehofchu Yomim Elu, that these days will be transformed, as I pointed out last week a number of times. Yehofchu, not just it will be eliminated. Yehofchu means they'll be transformed because their real purpose will be revealed. That's called transformation. On a personal level, it means that every challenge is meant to bring out deeper strengths within us. And of course, this couldn't be more apropos today with all the uncertainties and the unknowns that COVID-19 has brought on, all its secondary effects, its exponential impact on us, our communities, and the world. But we've been around, we've seen. In every generation, there were enemies that stood up and tried to annihilate us. Now it's a different type of enemy. It could be a psychological, emotional one. But we come out stronger than ever. So Tisha B'Av has very powerful lessons for us. And being that Tisha B'Av is Thursday, now we're on Hey Tevis. So I mentioned the Arizal quite deliberately, because the Arizal, such a force in history, taught us about the Tzimtzum, gave us a new way of looking at how the existential loneliness of our lives, the possibility, how we explain the ability that a world can be so concealed. In a sense that the Arizal taught us what Tisha B'Av is, the dynamics of Tisha B'Av, but also the positive light that lies in the deepest darkness. Because in order to create a tzimtzum, to conceal, you need a lot more power than to reveal. You look at an individual, talk about, let's say, a brilliant person, a Talmid Chacham. What takes more strength, for him to teach or for him to be silent? You ask him his opinion, there's something happening. Is it easier for him to give an opinion or easier to restrain himself? Of course it's easier to give the opinion, because he knows. Restraint, concealment for the parent to hide from the child requires more energy. Kav yochel. So the same thing, in the Tzimtzum's black hole lies more power than in the energy of the Kav and the energy of Eir Ein Sof before the Kav, because the Tzimtzum was able to override the Eir Ein Sof. So truthfully, it wasn't really a concealment from the perspective of the divine consciousness, the divine energy. But the fact that from the recipient's point of view, that Tzimtzum dominates over Eir tells you what kind of power it has. Except it's inverted power. Like we talk about a black hole. that the power of gravity is so strong, it doesn't allow light to escape. The power of the koyach hagvul, the koyach hatzimtzum, I should say. Hein gvuresav, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Shaykhud Vamuna. The power to restrain, to conceal, comes from a deeper place than the power to reveal. And that power, when it's finally tapped and unleashed, is indestructible. That's why the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, the Geula will be one, Geula Shein Acharei HaGolus. Now will be a Geula, there will never be another concealment after that. Because once you tap into such so-called concealed energy, then you create something that no concealment can ever challenge again. So the first time, meaning when the Tzimtzum happened, first time, I don't mean this in time, conceptually, it's happening right now, then yes, concealment overrode, not sure how it used to say, but it definitely, the concealment was more powerful than the revelation. And then once you transform that, not you dismiss it or you ignore it, you transform that concealment and you recognize that concealment is only there to bring out our deepest strengths, then you have something that was forever indestructible, forever a geula, forever a Beis HaMikdash, Mikdash ad nekein yedecha, that will never be destroyed again, and a permanent state of connection, which of course will then allow us to grow step by step, but grow not from negative to positive, from concealment to light, but in light itself, from one level to another level, which of course is an infinite journey. So, the Arizal, one more point about the Arizal, which I always marvel at. The Arizal was on the scene in the public barely 2 years, a year and 8 months, I believe. He came to Tzfas, immediately was recognized as something of a different reality. And Tzfas was then the hub of so many great scholars. You're talking about the Beis Yosef, the Alshich, the Shlomo Alkavitz, the Ramak. The list goes on. The Shalor writes, the Shalor who lived in Krakow and other country cities in Europe, in his last years he came to Israel. So he traveled through Damascus. He met the Rab Chaim Vital there. Rab Chaim Vital showed him the writings of the Arizal. He writes in the Shalor, writes these words, that these teachings, from the time of Matan Torah, there was nothing like this. That's what he writes. And the Shalor was one of the greatest scholars in history. From the time of Matan Torah. We're talking about the time, we're talking here, you're talking about Moshe, Yeshua, the Skenim, the Nevi'im. You're talking about the Tanoim, the Amoraim, Rabbanu Savaroi, the Ge'enim, the Rishenim. So there's something about that Arizal that it's very clear that these greatest of scholars were in awe of. And it's also interesting that Arizal united everyone. Except for one, I think, one rare exception in Europe. When news came about that Arizal, he was skeptical until later understood that his skepticism had no place. Everybody accepts him. Sfardim, Ashkenazim, Chassidim, non-Chassidim. Arizal. Similar to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Now you find throughout history there were Rambam was not accepted by everybody. There were those that actually did not accept him. They even burned his Svarim. Later the Ramban and others, Haisnatzels, they defended him and explained. So it's not common that all Jewish communities should unite around someone. So I've not seen this, but it comes to mind that since the Rashbi's Yartzeit is also during a sad period. Sefiros Eimer, like Boimer. The Arizal is this period of the 9 days. Because Magdim Rafula Makkah, these individuals uniquely represented unity. Unity in Torah, first of all, between the soul and body of Torah, the Shmosa Daraisa, and Gufa Daraisa, the body and the soul and body of Torah. Which by extension is the unity of all people, because when you touch the soul of something, from the soul's perspective, we're all connected, as the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 32 in Tanya. So that's why they're uniquely their Yartzeit, the day when their whole Avodah and everything they did gathers together and elevates and blesses us, and Poel Yeshua's B'Kerev Haaretz, impact us, as the Alter Rebbe says in Ageres HaKedesh, Siman Chav Zayin and Chav Ches. So they're uniquely fit to be the antidote to the Lo nogu koved zeh b'zeh, the dishonor shown, the lack of respect shown by the students of Rabbi, 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, and that magefa, that plague ended on Lag B'Omer. And the Arizal comes 5th of Av, right before Tisha B'Av, which the second temple was destroyed due to sinas chinam, divisiveness. Who better to counter that are forces of unity, Rashbi, Arizal. And to throw it in, on Rosh Chodesh of, whose yahrzeit is that? Aaron HaKohen. Also, Havid mitalmidav shalom, mitalmidav shal Aaron, oyev shalom, v'reidav shalom, eves abrias, u'makarvan l'teira. Aaron was distinguished by his bringing love and shalom bayis among the people. It says in Svarim Chassidus that Aaron, first letters of Aaron, Aleph Hey, are like Ahava, love, Chesed, Koyin, Isha Chesed. So all these individuals come in a time when we need that type of unity. And they unite people, and they unite all the parts of Torah. Of course, the lesson to us, we need more than ever. The Loi Motza Kodesh Baruch Hu Klei Mazik Bracha, Ela Shalom. Unity, peace, wholesomeness, connection, love. The greatest antidote to all our problems, both individually, familial, on a family level, on a communal level, and of course on a global level. Okay. With that, let us go to some questions. Well, first, a little housekeeping. I know that this may sound like, for some, I'm just repeating myself. We are marking the essays as we speak. We're finishing up where we left off right before Pesach, when we officially were going to announce the winners, but then COVID and God had other plans. We're going to finish the marking and we will announce the winners. So please, just be patient. This is, I don't feel defensive or feel any way I have to explain, but I think because people have invested so much time and energy, we absolutely honor that, and the marks will come out and we will announce the winners. So stay tuned. A few other housekeeping announcements. So someone writes, actually a technical question. When I want to hear what you have to say about a particular topic, often in several different videos, where can I access a Mara Mekamis sources? Thank you for your priceless guidance. So please go to ChassidusApplied.com and you can search by topic. If you have a topic, you want to hear about reincarnation, you want to hear about Tzimtzum, you want to hear about Chassidus advice for marriage, you want to hear about other things, just type in the words, keywords, whatever comes to mind. And the topics, every program is listed with topics. As a matter of fact, the YouTube version is also time-stamped, which means you can click and it takes you straight to that part of the program. You don't have to listen to the entire hour. And just go please take advantage of these resources. They're free resources. We put a lot of work in it, which is one of the reasons we're running the campaign, because we need support to keep building this and keep expanding it. So just go to ChassidusApplied.com and type in whatever words you want, and you'll hopefully find what you're looking for. Since I'm mentioning that website, that's where you also have an anonymous form, completely anonymous, where you can submit any question, any thought, any comment, and I will definitely address it. There's a lot of backup. There's a lot of questions that come in. It's only been growing and accelerating, thank God. So please don't hesitate and write. It may take a little time. Sometimes I consolidate them, try to time them based on the times in which we are in. And you'll also find all the previous episodes I just mentioned, as well as essays from all the years of the contests and other resources around Ayin Beis and Samach Vov. And here I also invite you all to a daily class I give every day except Shabbos at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Sundays it's 10 a.m. And it's a wonderful class. Just join us by Zoom, or it's also now on YouTube. So just go to the ChassidusApplied.com, type in Ayin Beis, or go to ayinbeis.com, and you'll see the details of the Zoom address, the Zoom room that you can enter and participate. Another few comments. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your priceless guidance. Okay. Thank you for the Yom Kippur Nigun that you sang last week, Reb Simon. Gewaldig stuff. Great answers as usual. Love. Definitely keep singing. Very powerful. That's another writer. Shalom, dear Rabbi Jacobson. Thank you for your weekly master class and Chassidus Applied talks, which are beyond excellent. Okay. I thank you for all these beautiful comments. We all know that every compliment is meant to evoke even more strengths and more resources and more programs. So I assure you, I will do whatever I can, my ability, to use my skills and talents and everyone I can inspire to continue, because we have a goal to meet, and that is to reach 7.8 billion people and counting. We want a world that's filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Nothing less will do. We have to do our part, and no question God will do his part. But we have to keep trucking. We have to keep forging ahead. We have to keep being stronger and march toward that destination. And we need to do this together. So please partner with me. Spread the word. That's the key thing. Because when each of us spreads it to another, shares it with friends, that's the ripple butterfly effect that ultimately transforms the world from das tachten. Obviously, God can do his part in his way. We don't need to short-circuit the whole process. But we still need to do what we need to do, as the Rebbe said, tut alles was kent, do everything you can. Maybe there'll be 1 or 2 or 3 of you that will come together and strategize. So that's exactly what I've set out, the objective, to fulfill that directive. And as I said, please join me in every possible way. Okay, with that, we did a question now. Okay, as I said, I tried to address all questions, even those that are not always so politically correct or pleasant. But so someone writes, before I continue, let me give cross-referencing to other episodes where I discussed Hey Av and Tisha B'Av, episodes 77, 120, 173, 221, 222, and 270 and 271. Yes. Now, someone writes, a cause for concern. What's the cause for concern? Excuse me. What do we say to someone who argues that there's no need to fast on Tisha B'Av or other fast days since we are in Moshiach's times? Okay. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, first I must once again commend you for tackling some very difficult questions. I must commend you for speaking truth and calming our fears, giving us focus in these chaotic times. I would like to call attention to a certain sector of the community who almost every year since Gimel Tammuz has touted, since we are in Yom Moshiach, the days of Moshiach, we don't have to fast on the 17th of Tammuz, on Tisha B'Av, and they show quote-unquote proof. One of these groups sent me a letter to this effect. I tried explaining to them and others that they have misinterpreted this and their proofs. Can this issue be addressed? It's misleading many unassuming Jews. Okay, well, to me it's so obvious and a given, but clearly not everything is an obvious and given to others. We have a Torah. So let's start with this. How do we know Moshiach is going to come? How do we know it's Yemei Mashiach? How do you know anything? Because we have a Torah. This isn't based on whims and personal feelings. We have a Torah. The Eibishter gave a Torah and said in the Torah what he wants, and said that there will be Mashiach will come, and he gave signs. Said what we need to do, speed it up, to speed up Mashiach's coming. Our Ma'aseinu v'Avodeseinu. The list goes on. That's what it takes. Any place where there's a doubt or question, even when there's no doubt and question, we don't come up with our own laws, our own rules. There's a Torah. The Torah talks about, Hilchas Tainiyas talks about fasting, and the reasons behind it, and what days you fast. There's Shulchan Aruch for this. So I'm not sure exactly even how there's a Havamina, that someone's going to override what the Torah says. Listen, you want to do whatever you want? That whole world is doing whatever they want. But don't claim that you're coming a Torah and talking in the name of Mashiach. There's a Torah for these things. You have a Shaila, go to Arav. So I'm not sure, B'chlal, where anybody's getting any type of direction and guidance. It's complete Amaratzis. It's not just Hefkedis, wild. It's Amaratzis, ignorance. Someone's going to decide, you know what, I don't want to keep Shabbos because whatever, I found some medrash that Mashiach comes, it'll be afterward, mitzvahs p'telis losullah. The mitzvahs will all be eliminated losullah. There's a Maimer Chazal like that, the Gemara says. So why do I do mitzvahs? Mashiach is here already. This makes sense. Even if you find that Maimer Chazal, you paskin halacha based on that. I mean, to me, the whole thing is ludicrous, to be honest. But since you're asking the question, and yes, there are many unassuming people who don't know better, and people start citing sources, there's a Torah Shulchan Aruch, unheard of, that somebody should come and decide that there's no fast day. I don't even know what it's like. Labor Shuftin asking, B'chlal not Dora doing. It's completely not something on the mat, on the discussion even. You could say there's two ways to interpret a Sikha, what the Rebbe means about this detail, that detail. But tampering with halacha, where do you find a precedent for that? The Rebbe would, halacha is the essence of Torah. You have a shaila about something, ask a Rav. You don't want that Rav, go to two Rabbonim. So I'm not sure, proofs ahead, proofs ahin. Bring a Rav that paskins, no Rav will paskin such a thing, no Rav could paskin such a thing. Not fasting, you decide when yes, when not. So the whole thing to me is absurd and completely not even worthy talking about. But since some people have brought up the question, it's not the first time I've heard this question. So let me set the record straight. And I think I said it pretty unequivocally. I know very often I say there's a gray area, case by case, and some people don't like that. But the truth is, that's a fact. It is case by case. But there are things that are pretty much black and white. There are black and whites. Halach is one of them. There's no pekuach nefesh. Yeah, person is not well, so then decha kol hatera kuli, even Yom Kippur. But that's for a different reason completely. So that's my response, and I hope and use it well. If anybody comes up with anything, you can let them. They don't not necessarily respect what I say, but you can tell them what I've said, and let them adarab, let them go find halacha shulchan aruch otherwise. Okay, good. Next question is performing a mitzvah. Okay, here's the question. 1 second, let me read it. Which takes precedent? Doing a mitzvah or helping my wife? Okay, performing a mitzvah spouse which takes priority. Even though Friday night minyan is back, my wife has asked me to instead remain at home to help out with our young children. Which takes priority? The duty to fulfill a mitzvah or the mitzvah of shalom bayis, prioritizing my wife's requests? Well, if indeed there is a choice to be made, and they both can be done, there's not even a question. Of course, shalom bayis comes first. The halacha for that too, the end of the laws of Chanukah, the Rambam says, if you have money only for one lighting a flame, and it's either a ner Chanukah or a ner Shabbos, so you would think, I'm explaining, you would think you would light Chanukah, it's once a year, Shabbos every week. No, because ner Chanukah, lighting a Chanukah light is for Pesum Nissa, to publicize God's miracle. Lighting a Shabbos candle is for shalom bayis. And the whole Torah was not given to shalom, only for peace in this world. The Rambam brings there, to the point God says, erase my name to preserve peace between husband and wife in the laws of Seita, when they put the name of Hashem on a tongue, and it could be erased, God's name, which is a severe thing. That's the bottom line. So that tells you everything you need to know. If indeed you need to choose. And shalom bayis is a much greater mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah versus something that's not a mitzvah. It's a greater mitzvah. And it's actually a mitzvah that brings other mitzvahs. Because clearly if the Torah says shalom comes first, shalom bayis comes first, that is because it's going to lead you to other mitzvahs, not because it's going to compromise, God forbid. Now, in case-by-case basis, going back to that, there are situations where you can discuss with your wife in a way that's pleasant, that you'd like to go daven. Can I go now for a half hour, an hour? Most likely if you speak pleasantly and not in an argumentative way, and you don't use a mitzvah against a mitzvah, you don't say, I have to go daven, I have to go learn, I would think that in many cases, spouses will be kind to each other and respond in kind. But if you start kicking and screaming that you have mitzvahs to do and she's disturbing you and you have no time for the children or for her, you can imagine what reaction she would have. And vice versa is also true. So we have to also have that type of sensitivity and awareness since we're talking about this topic. Okay. But I appreciate the question. It's always good to talk and reinforce this point, even if it's pretty understandable on its own, but that's what we're here for. My life Chassidus Applied. The next question I found very interesting question. Very often, many questions are all interesting to be honest, but sometimes a question comes up you haven't quite heard that way. And this is a question actually that was born during this time of COVID-19. Question is about bitachon, about trust. Okay. The short of the question is, does bitachon apply also for trusting God to provide us with luxuries? And here's the detailed question. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. With everything going on nowadays with COVID, v'chulu, that's etc., my wife and I have been having a lot of serious conversations about bitachon, about trust. This is a huge issue and even more important now with everything going on. Yeah, absolutely. My wife usually agrees with me, but we have one point that we can't seem to agree upon. I tell her that you can have bitachon not only for basic necessities, but also for things that are quote-unquote luxuries. I tell her the story with two people that were having this debate. I think it was in Vilna. One guy said he will have bitachon that he will get a pocket watch, a luxury in those days. And lo and behold, a few days later, a gvir, a wealthy person, came over to him and said he just had a large deal go through, and to thank Hashem, he wanted to buy a gold pocket watch for a Talmud Chacham. This doesn't seem, however, to convince her at all. My question is there a source of Chassidus about this? Am I wrong? I feel like if a person can have true bitachon, that Hashem will make him rich, that it will happen. Please expound. Interesting question. Because bitachon means that not just we believe, we actually trust God, that God will fulfill our needs, our desires, our interests, will help us in every possible way. So you can ask the question, just rephrasing this question, does that apply only to necessities? Food, drink, shelter, basic necessities. Who says, let's say you want to have 5 homes and 10 cars. So does bitachon apply there? I'm going to trust in God, I'm going to get all of that. Or is that in the gather of Moshiach, what you just because you want to indulge, God has to indulge you? It's an interesting question. So what comes to mind is at the end of chapter 7 in Tanya, chapter 8 in Tanya, where he talks about Chochmas Chitzenis, chapter 8. He talks about learning not Torah, that in general it's metama, it toxifies, it contaminates the mind, except with exceptions if you are using that Chochmah either to serve God, or kardim lachtach, you know how to use it for Avodas Hashem. And when he talks about, or using it for parnasa, and he says even parnasa barchava, meaning beyond what you need. So there's clearly the emphasis there, as the Rebbe explains and others, that there's an element of doing something even more than just your needs. So there's a certain type of opening to learn Chochmas Chitzenius if it's going to help you find more than your necessity. It just comes to mind as a parallel to some extent. However, the question is, what's the limit? What's the limit? So I've not seen anywhere specifically a source that discusses this particular question. There is the Tzemach Tzedek in Mitzvahs, Tzechalachas, Mitzera, and other places where he talks about that bitachon means believing in God and knowing that you make a keli b'derech hateva through your work, but ultimately God is going to bless you what He wants to bless you. Therefore, there's no need to worry whether you're going to make more or less. Because whatever effort you did, it's not about your effort that's going to bring the blessing, it's God's blessing. So based on that, you could argue, your job is to do the work, and you could pray to God and ask God to give you ashirus. Birchas Hashem hitashir. It's the blessing of God that gives us wealth, and have bitachon that will happen, and may or may not. So you could argue that our job is just to do what we need to do. And whether you'll be on Osher or not is not up to you. But you could also make the argument that why not, if you do have you set your sights high and you say, I want to be wealthy. And I will pray for that and I will make an effort. But his point is that you don't need to make more effort than necessary because it's not going to help. So I don't know if you could apply it to this discussion. I'm just bringing in some things that come to mind in trying to broaden the discussion. So after all is said and done, I have not found an exact black and white answer to this question. I would say it may be ultimately relative to the person. Like there are people who don't have an interest in being wealthy. They're fine, mistapik b'mur, they're happy with what their lives are like. There are people who want to be, but God didn't bless them with that. And they're also sameach b'chalke, they're satisfied with their lot. God will bless them, God will bless them. So they don't have the need, they don't have a bitachon that God is going to give them that type of wealth. There are others, on the other hand, who set their mind that they feel this is what they need. Now, does that mean God has to indulge? No. But it could be that God, that you are mechaven, that you actually are a keli. And God does want to bless you that way. So there is an element that bitachon can be part of the picture, that becoming wealthy and maintaining that type of wealth. But I don't know if you can make a blanket statement that just imagine and dream for all kinds of things that are luxuries beyond your needs, and bitachon will make it happen. I don't know if that can be made as a blanket statement. I would lean to say not. However, if you're in a position where you already have that keli, you have a business that's growing, you're already wealthy, and therefore this part of your destiny, then it's part of your context of, it's also in the orbit and context of your bitachon. If, however, that's not part of your destiny, it's not part of it, or at least it's not even in your mind, or even all the efforts you've made have not yielded that type of fruit, then it could be that it's not in your domain to have bitachon like that, and you could have bitachon in other matters. This is the general response I would give to this topic. It also comes to mind is the Baal Shem Tov story where someone asked for children, they had wealth. The Baal Shem Tov said that the channel is open for one or the other. You're going to have to give up one to have the other. That tells you also that certain things are predestined, and even though bitachon definitely can open up channels, but it's not black and white in the context of that if you have bitachon, it'll open up the channel. Like the difference between tefillah and bracha. Bracha, it says, a blessing opens up not new channels, it just takes away the blocks and obstacles that allow your destiny to be fulfilled. Tefillah, you have the power for Yehi Ratzon, for something new. So is tefillah in the category of bitachon, or is bracha in the category of bitachon? You can argue that tefillah is beyond bitachon. Bitachon trust is more like bracha. So you can get what is due to you. Tefillah can open up new opportunities and have something that wasn't even destined for you. So that's a tefillah, but that is not based on bitachon. Is tefillah connected to bitachon? These are just some thoughts and questions. I don't, as you see, I'm giving context based on my understanding of the ideas. And please, if anybody has something to weigh in on this topic, a source, or something that can add to the discussion and the dialogue, by all means, I'll be happy to read it and share it with others. Okay, next question. Well, these are questions that came in already. I'm starting to, as I said, integrate questions from previous programs. So, meaning from pre-COVID, I should say, BC. So let's talk about Gog and Magog. It's a question that came in around Pesach time, actually. So let me talk Gog and Magog. What is Gog and Magog, and has the Rebbe ever spoken about it? So Gog and Magog, let's begin. In Tanakh, it talks about, in some of the Sfarim and the Nevi'im talk about a Melchamas Gog and Magog. Two nations that will go to war with each other. And it's debated what exactly do these two nations mean, what does it represent, and so on. So he continues, there's a prophecy saying there will be a war called Gog and Magog, and right afterward Moshiach will come. But during every recent major conflict, there are some who say this is Gog and Magog, but it turns out it isn't. Some even say the current conflict with Iran may be it. So what exactly is Gog and Magog? Has the Rebbe ever spoken about it? My personal theory is this. Magog is Rosh Tevis, make America great again. Make America great again, which means Donald Trump will start the war that will lead us to ushering a Moshiach. Number 2, do we know if the war of Gog and Magog will be a physical war or a spiritual one? Number 3, what is the war of Gog and Magog? Does this war happen immediately before Moshiach comes, or can it happen a few generations before? Number 4, Gog and Magog, Hey Tevis. Is it possible that the war of Gog and Magog was fought on Hey Tevis between Barry Garari and the Rebbe? 5, is it possible that the war of Gog and Magog is the battle for control of 770 between the Mashiachists and the Antis? Number 6, what is the war of Gog and Magog that will happen before Mashiach comes? When the war of Gog and Magog happens, will we recognize it and then be aware that Mashiach is about to come? Or only after Mashiach comes will we be able to look back and say, oh, that was the war of Gog and Magog. So, the original source, and we'll begin discussing this here, if need be we'll follow up, is in the book of Yecheskel. The book of Yecheskel, in chapters Lamed Ches and Lamed 38 and 39, describes a climactic battle that will be instigated by Gog and or Magog, and will be waged against Israel and Gog. So it's not a war between Gog and Magog, it will be initiated by Gog and or Magog, and it will be against Israel and God. The defeat of Gog and Magog will precipitate the Messianic redemption. That's what it says in the Pesukim there. Some of the most cryptic verses, shrouded in mystery. Commentaries try to explain it in different ways. Is it necessary? Will it happen for sure? Could it not happen? And what does it consist of? You ask whether it's a physical war, a spiritual war. What does it mean? What's its significance? Chassidus talks about it a little, but not a lot. So let me just give some takes on it that I've heard and I've read. And again, this is open for anyone who has insight or thoughts. This is what we're here for. This is why my life Chassidus Applied. First of all, why a war altogether? Why do you need wars? Why can't we just go peacefully? When you read the Rambam, he doesn't speak about Muhammad's Gog and Magog in Halacha. As the Rebbe says, and Halacha means it's not necessary. Are there Midrashim and Psukim? Yes, it's a possibility. And it could also be that we've gone through it already. But let's start, why do you need a Muhammad altogether? Well, wars can be for several reasons. A war can be an unjust war. Look, World War II, initiated by the Nazis, by Hitler, Yimach Shemai. Wars by enemies, by people who have lust for power, hate for others, or other agendas. There are also wars that are Milchamas Mitzvah, a war that is a mitzvah to fight this war. Wars that were fought in Eretz Yisrael against the enemies of Israel. Milchamas Reshus is an optional war. So wars are fought. The bad wars I'm not even going to talk about because that's not what we're talking about. The wars that are fought for a purpose is either to correct a wrong or because there are negative forces in this world that need to be eradicated. Of course, we would prefer no wars altogether. Some wars are self-defense. You fight the war because someone attacked. Gog and Magog, the consensus more or less, and it's not complete, is one of the reasons, is the ultimate battle between good and evil. The evil forces, similar to like the Deir HaFloga, the Tower of Babel, they went to war, they wanted to be gods. So it's symbolic of the darkness of this world going to war with what is true in emes. Just like Amalek waged war against Israel. Others did. So Gog and Magog represents a final war that will take place before Moshiach comes, to clarify who the enemy is, who is right, and establish once and for all the proper approach. Like David HaMelech fought his wars, and after that Shlomo HaMelech did not have to fight war because now everything was established. You could build the Beis HaMikdash and so on. Now the question is, where is this war? Some say it's happened. Some say it was World War II. Some say it was World War I. Some say it was previous wars. From the Rebbe, it's pretty clear that we're not going to have to go through another war of Gog and Magog. That all the wars have been fought. The Gzeiros, the Mittler Rebbe writes, Lo Yiyeh Eid, we once spoke about this, that there won't be more persecutions and Gzeiros meaning like Tak V'Tat, Gzeiros decrees against the Jewish people. So essentially, all the wars have been fought. Could it be a spiritual war, where a war between, let's say, ignorance, materialism, and spirituality, or like we see a war today between godlessness and God? In the words of Tehillim that the Rebbe Rashab cites in Kol HaYetzel Mechames Beis David. Yes, it could be included in that as well. You say that Rambam does say Yilchem Mechames Hashem v'Yenatseach, but it's very unclear what war that will be. Mechames Hashem will fight the war of God. Some associate that with Gog and Magog. So you see from all the above, it's not. We don't have a black and white answer. We cannot say it's this and not that. But we were assured that the wars have been fought. We don't have to fight any more wars. The Rebbe made it clear that transition into Geula will be peaceful and natural, and will not require bloodshed. It will not require any negative things. The Rebbe said this a number of times, telling us that Gog and Magog has been done already. It's similar to another mysterious idea, Mashiach ben Yosef coming before Mashiach ben David. So some say Moshiach ben Yosef was connected to Arizal. Some say it's a stage in Ruchnius, Lav Dafka, a person named by that. It's definitely the process, like Yosef came before Yehuda as leader. The point is, they all are symbolic of levels. Very often it is spiritual. It could also be physical, but practically now, Gog and Magog is dealt with. We do not need any more wars. So that we're ready for the Messianic redemption, and whatever had been fought has been fought. Let's be honest, World War II and World War I left over 120 million people dead. So it wasn't a small matter. It was definitely, talk about a wake-up call, talk about upheavals. And following that, it was an age of prosperity. We have our challenges now. I wouldn't call them a war. They're a different type of war, a war within our own psychological makeup, to find the fortitude, to find the confidence to forge ahead and not become demoralized or defeated or disoriented. But does that fit into this? It definitely is a war that helps clarify things. As I said, Yuzbaru, it creates crystallization of values, of ideas, and hopefully leads us into a new state of consciousness in a new world order called Moshiach and Geula. That's a brief overview. There's more to say on the topic. I'm not going to comment on everything else said. Most of it is speculation. And what's the point of speculation? Okay, let's do a little follow-up. Then we'll do the Chassidus question. And we will conclude. So follow-up. Let's start a follow-up on masks in 770. Hi, Rab Simon, I agree with you on your approach regarding wearing masks in 770. This is something the Rabbanim and the doctors in the community said should be done. If one doesn't care about themselves, they should at least be considerate for others. I would like to encourage you, if you think something is right, you should come out with it and not be politically correct or apologetic about it. Of course, there will be some who won't like what you say, but you can't please everyone. The fact is, there's still danger out there, so it's always better to side with caution. Hashem should protect us all, and the way the person commented on the show last night, Hashem should indeed protect the fools as well. Hatzlacha Rabba Moshiach now. It's referring to a previous program where I spoke about this. So thank you for that. And I think it's been pretty clear that I'm not exactly towing anyone's line and trying to be politically correct. I say it as I believe. I'm not looking to be provocative just to be provocative. But yes, to be clear, and when we have to state things unambiguously, that's what we need to do. But I appreciate your words. Okay. Another follow-up goes back to episode 312. Marriage tensions and external teachings. So we back in 312. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. Oh, it's not a short one. I thoroughly enjoy your weekly broadcast. Thank you for addressing every issue that comes your way and adding light in your audience's lives with your sensitivity. I would like to follow up on this past week's episode. So we're talking about 312. So it's quite a few weeks ago. On two issues that in my current situation are related. One, the issue of marriage tensions. Two, the issue of external teachings, i.e. not from Torah sources. I recently came across a post on one of the websites about, with Dr. Lamb, who went through a number of slideshows depicting what are healthy behaviors in a good marriage, many of which I tried to introduce into my marriage over the years, but wasn't successful since my spouse didn't see eye to eye with me. He cites Dr. John Gottman a number of times and highly recommends that people should read his books. I have heard a number of years ago that the Rebbe would always say that for professional help, one should always seek advice from people who are based on Torah. However, I have yet to come across such practical books on marriage in the frum realm, such as the works of Dr. Gottman, who, by the way, from the looks of it, he himself is frum, though his works might be more based on psychology and not necessarily Torah. In the Rebbe's view, would it be okay to introduce such books to a strained marriage for the sake of making it a happier one? Would this be considered what the Rebbe said, not to go to external places for advice? Noting that these books aren't there to necessarily improve the thought mechanics of a marriage, such as Laura Doyle's books, understandably, thoughts and ideals should obviously stem from Torah. Rather, these books address the topic of healthy behaviors in a marriage. So to sum up the question, is anything that doesn't stem from Torah unacceptable? Or is there a practical rule of thumb to know where to draw the line. This issue can also present a problem when going to frum marriage counselors and not knowing it, maybe. They base their knowledge in non-Torah sources. P.S. I heard from very reliable sources that one of the current mashpiyim in Lubavitch recommends to many newlywed couples that they should read Men from Mars, Women Are from Venus book. My question is to the same effect. Feel free to omit names or shorten the question if necessary for video editing purposes. Thank you very much. Now, I didn't want to omit names because this is on many people's mind. My answer is very straightforward. There's an expression, Teira b'goyim al tamin, Chachma b'goyim tamin. Chachma, wisdom, including psychological wisdom and insight, through trial and error, or through introspection, or through coming to different observations, exists. And like it is with medicine, we go to who knows medicine best. There is an element of psychological insight that comes from different places. Now, the Torah itself says it gives permission to the healer to heal. Does that apply to psychology? So we've talked about this at length in the past. It's not so simple, because psychology, you could say, is the domain of Torah. Tanya, understanding the human soul. If you're talking about heart surgery, you're talking about real clinical medical issues, there's that permission. But there are also overlaps. There are situations where, yes, there are excellent psychiatrists and excellent psychologists. There are many that are not excellent, but there are also frum that are not excellent. So frumkeit is not what makes it. It comes down to experience and know-how. So my response would be, if a marriage is in a challenging situation, try to find a frum therapist, someone you trust, Yedid Maven, an expert, but is also a Yedid Maven who is both a friend and an expert, and see if it's helpful. Great. A person like that can then look in some of these books or look elsewhere and help make determinations. Now, should we ourselves look? Look, this is a free country. I'm not going to tell anyone don't read a book, especially if we're reading other things anyway. If a book can help, but you're not necessarily going to know if it's really going to help your situation. Some books are, Men from Mars and Women from Venus is a lot of platitudes. It's humorous. There are a lot of truths to it, but there are better books, I can tell you, than that one. Is it a bad book? In a sense, going to drive you against Torah? Not necessarily. But that's where, like anything, comes down to. Where you draw the line is get objective advice. People call me sometimes because I know some of these books, and I tell them what I think about different theories and books. Some of them are very good. Some of them address not just marriage, addiction, other traumas, and so on. So it all comes down to case by case. Having an objective professional in your life can be tremendously helpful, because if he's a Torah person and respects Torah, he can help you sift through which is which. So I'm not going to go now and make a reading list what I think is appropriate, not appropriate. I don't think it's always based on what makes sense. There are many people who say things that make sense, but their underlying foundations are not necessarily Torah-based, and actually can be even antithetical to Torah. So we have to be careful, because we're dealing with a neshama, with a nefesh. And a nefesh is sensitive matters here. We're not just talking about whether you take an Advil for a headache. You're talking about deeper matters, and you want it to be in the spirit of Torah and Yiddishkeit. So there are many psychological systems that Rebbe writes in letters. For example, Viktor Frankl's approach, logotherapy, man's search for meaning, and his approach that Rebbe says is more aligned with Torah than other approaches. Freud, on the other hand, is very not Torah-dik. Does that mean there's no wisdom there? So this is, you see, it's a comprehensive picture. That's why you need experts who know the entire spectrum, and they know different approaches and what you can lift, and what is appropriate to lift, what is not appropriate. Hard to answer a black and white question like that. But to just blanket dismiss anything that's out there that's not Torah-based, I would not do. To blanket say just go to everything because whatever works or whatever people think works is also not correct. A lot out there is really worthless and nonsense, and frankly could even be destructive in their advice, the marital advice or other forms of advice. Okay, so with that, let me go to the Chassidus question. There's more follow-ups, but we'll work them in. I'm glad I was able to work that in. It's been weeks I wanted to say it, now I didn't. Now I was able to, thank God. It's off my plate. Does Chassidus question, does Chassidus connect the 9th of Av with the statement about the sefiros 10 and not 9? So the 9th of Av is the 9th day in Av, 9 days in Av. So everything is significant. It's not 10, it's not 11, it's not 8. Then there's an expression in Sefer Yetzirah that says about the sefiros, blima, sefiros have no substance. 10 spheres and not 9, 10 and not 11. So it's an interesting parallel. I myself have made this parallel. I believe this person is probably referring to that because it seems interesting. 10 and not 9 means 9 is not complete and 10 is the way it's supposed to be. I remember even writing an article after 9/11, 9/11, 9 and 11, but not 10. That the imbalance that 9/11 reflected was very much missing the 10. What is the 10th Sefira? Malchus. So although I have not seen explicitly in Chassidus a connection between Eser v'Lei Tesha to Tisha B'Av, but when you learn Chassidus, you learn, especially if you learn Nachmu Eter, the Maimorim of Eter, Tofrei Shayin from the Rebbe Rashab, which is based on the Eirat Teira Nach, the Tzemach Tzedek. So there's that point here, quoting the Arizal, that the Yerida of Tisha B'Av was a Yerida Ployim in Malchus. Malchus was the real victim of destruction. Miut HaLavona, the Lavona. Because Malchus is the Makabel, Malchus is Knesset Yisrael, and Golus affects Malchus. Malchus is so dependent on Lesla Megarmo Klum. It has no light of its own. It has no anything of its own. It's dependent on Ashpa. So when there's a severing and a disconnect, Malchus is the one that suffers most. So essentially you could say the Pagam HaMalchus, or say Pagam HaLavona, the wound in the moon, is a wound in Malchus. In simple English, Malchus is dignity, the Malchus of a person. So you could have all the 9 spheres, intelligence, emotions, but you're missing the dignity, you're missing self-worth, that you were created in the divine image. That's a fundamental, that's what happened on Tisha B'Av. A wound, an injury in Malchus, a concealment in Malchus. And that's what the Arizal says. Tu B'Av is one of the greatest holidays because it's the Aliyah of Malchus relative to his descent. So with that attitude, you can explain that 10 and not 9, because 9 means everything but Malchus. That's Tisha B'Av, 9. And we want the 10th. Yom Kippur is 10, 10th day of the month. 10 is the Mispar HaShalom, is the complete cycle. So when you have 9, yes, so Tisha B'Av is lacking that. Again, I have not seen a directly related Tisha B'Av to this idea of 10 and not 9, but it's not a far leap to say they're related. And there may be something in the Kisva Arizal about it. I would have to look it up. If anybody has more information on this, by all means, please share. Okay, my friends. Heyov, the Yotzet of the Arizal, powerful, powerful day. I remember in Tov Shalom at Hey, when the Rebbe, it was a very year, a lot of koch and tzim b'mishpat tepoda, and the Rebbe gave out my morim, he was Magia then, those days before Tisha B'Av. And he spoke about the Arizal's Teiras, about the 5th of Av. So the Arizal should be a mokir of source of blessings to us, especially in these challenging times, and should teach us the Yesodis of the Teiras Arizal, of Tzimtzum, and the other Yesodis of Kabbalah, which Chassidus brings alive, to teach us to see the deeper light within these days, within Tisha B'Av. And we should be able to Yahavchi Yom Meil L'Sasun L'Simcha L'Moedim Tevim. I want to mention again, we've launched, I'm excited to say, we've launched in these 9 days when it's a big mitzvah to give tzedakah. Tziyim b'mishpat tipada v'shaveh b'tzedakah. Because tzedakah mekareves hasagula. It brings gula. Tzedakah unites us, the counterforce to the divisiveness. So we should be zeichet that through our tzedakah, we should be able to be zeichet to the gula. So we've launched the Meaningful Lifeline campaign. Go to meaningfullife.com/lifeline. It is essentially a lifeline we share with you, and hopefully you can give us a lifeline in helping us continue these vital programs and programming. And the schus of your tzedakah, we should have a shaveh b'tzedakah, the geula amitis v'ashlema. This has been My Life Chassidus Applied every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. It's episode 319. It should be a gebenchte week, a Yahavchi Yom Me'ela week, and these days should be turned and transformed into the greatest holidays in the geula amitis v'ashlema.
This program is brought to you by My Life, Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.